Hi there, this is Pablo, and in this video I'm going to explain how to bring CPQ data into your Salesforce environment with Salto. On the previous video, we saw how to include product data into the element tree by editing the Salesforce configuration in Salto. In this video, we're going to take this further and extract all of our CPQ data. So to do that, we're going to go again to Settings, Edit next to Salesforce, then Edit next to your Salesforce configuration. And in the previous video, what we did is we added this data object which included product and created the product unique ID as the name. What we're going to do is I'm going to replace this object here and I'm going to paste a new one which you can find in the link in the description below. So as you can see, this is a much more complicated example and we're going to go through all the attributes one by one. First, what we're saying here is we want to include data records and we want to include all the objects of the CPQ namespace. This is the name of the CPQ managed package or the namespace of that package. So we want to include all the objects of CPQ. We also want to include the product2 object, but we actually want to exclude some CPQ objects. The reason we exclude some of the CPQ objects is because these ones are actual data that is relevant to a specific customer. For example, a quote that you give to a customer or the price that is specific to a contract, etc. This is not like the other type of CPQ data, which is more like configuration data, like your products, your pricing rules, your product rules. This is customer specific. And for that reason, we typically recommend that you exclude them. Next up, we have the allow reference to. Basically what this is products can have references to the price book object and the price book entry. So what this means is that even if price book and price book entry are not in the included list of objects, we allow references to that. So if a product has a relationship to the price book entry, we will show that relationship even if price book entry has not been included in the included objects list. Next up, we have how we define the IDs. The reason we need to generate IDs is because Salto is going to keep a relationship between these records in this environment and any other environment that you deploy these records to. So let's say that, for example, you deploy a custom action from environment A to environment B. In the future, if you want to deploy a change to the same custom action, Salto needs a way to identify that the two records in the two orgs are the same. And the way we do that is by telling Salto which fields of that record should make up the internal Salto ID for that record. So what we're saying here is that for the custom action CPQ record, the internal Salto ID is going to be a string made up of the location field, display order, type, and the name fields. All of these fields will be extracted from the custom action, they'll be concatenated, and they'll create a unique ID. That means that if you then deploy this to another environment, that other environment will have the same ID. And in the future, you can just deploy changes to that record and Salto is going to know which record in the other environment to deploy the changes to. Now, by default, we specified that the ID is generated by using the IDs of any master records on that object and the name. So let's say, for example, if I have a product called laptop, laptop is going to be the internal Salto ID. However, for some objects, you may want to specify an override, and that means your own specific way of specifying how the ID should be generated. And that's where the override section comes in. Basically, here you specify the object name and how we specify the IDs, which I just explained a few minutes ago. So for CPQ, we recommend to use this default configuration where we have specific ways to specify the ID for different CPQ objects. So again, we have a specific way for the custom action object. For product feature, we use all the master detail fields of that product feature, like the product that is related to, etc., along with these fields. So for most CPQ configurations this works. You may need to change this to satisfy your business or data architecture requirements. And basically that's it. So once you have this configuration here, you just go and save changes again, and then fetch. Okay, so now that the fetch has completed, if we go back to the Explore tab and the element tree, if we open instances here, we can see all of our CPQ records like price conditions, price rules, etc. And now the same configuration can be applied to your own custom objects in the org that you want to treat as configuration data. So now let's see what the internal ID looks like. So let's go over here to custom actions. I'm going to open one of them. And this long string that you see here is the unique ID that Salto is going to keep for this custom action. And this is derived from the configuration that we saw earlier. So if we look at the string here, or the ID, we can see that the first part is derived from the location, then the display order, then the type, and finally the name or label. And we concatenate all those, and that creates that unique ID. So again, as I said earlier, if we deploy this to another environment, that other environment is going to have the same ID, and that way we establish a connection between these two records. And that's how easy it is to pull your Salesforce CPQ data into Salto.